Hi guys, this is Itofa, Ivarah. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And for the very first time, I'm going to be sharing stories that I've never shared anywhere. Welcome to the Inside Scope. Not a lot of people know that I was born in Edo State and lived a huge chunk of my life in that city before we moved to the capital city of Nigeria, Abuja. And I was born to a fairly middle income family. My parents did their best for us to have the best in life. But one of the most critical factors that have inspired this conversation I want to have with you today is the fact that when you hear the concept going global, what comes to your mind? There was this notion or idea that you cannot make it until you travel abroad. And so people lived all their lives with the ambition that they needed to travel abroad to make it. But in my later years, as I began to evolve and I developed, I realized that I actually didn't need a passport to touch the world. I just needed a powerful and a very good idea. Check that again. I didn't need a passport to touch the world. I only needed a good idea to touch the rest of the world. What does that mean? If you go on Instagram, you've seen a few people add global to their name. Now, there are some individuals who added that global by reason of revelation, and there are others who added the title global to their name because they are just following a trend. But what does it really mean to be global? You don't have anything. You don't have a passport. You've never been to the edges of an airport. You haven't even seen a plane in real life. And a young man on YouTube is telling you that you can be global. What does that even mean? I remember one day I was sitting at a coffee shop in Abuja, and my mentor Faladuro had walked in, and he was just having a talk with a couple of us, and he gave the best and perfect analogy of what it means to be global. To be global means that you have developed and created an idea that has moved into realms and places your physical body has not touched. A good idea doesn't need a visa. A good idea doesn't need an immigration system to vet if it can penetrate into their system. If it is good enough, it will be adopted in Canada. If the idea is good enough, it will be adopted in South Africa. If the idea is very beautiful enough, it will be adopted in the halls of New York. And just maybe you'll be invited to come to the White House to get an award. And that's what it means for a person who is currently stuck in Makoko, Lagos, or somebody who is in the heartlands in Kaduna, or you're in the hills of Jos, and you're like, God, everybody's jackpot. What is the next move for me? What is the next plan for me? Am I just going to end up like this? Like, what is going to happen to me? Well, I bring you good news. You don't need passport to travel. You need a good idea. And so for me, the vision I had for my life was that I was going to read medicine, study medicine, become a doctor, specialize in pediatrics, and then marry a very beautiful wife. Well, life had a wonderful turn. I got into the University of Benin and ended up with a bachelor's in education. And for the first time in my life, I thought I had failed. How did I go from wanting to become a doctor to now I'm studying in a department where I would end up as a teacher, best of all, probably a professor. I was like, this is not the plan we had. And to cap it all, by the time I was finishing my program, because of certain limitations in the education system, I ended up with a 2-2. It's a whole story for another day. Missing results, absent cases for classes you attended. Those are some, flaws of the Nigerian public education system. And I ended up with a 2-2. Another part of my story opens up. I was afraid. So with the 2-2, who's going to employ me? How am I going to get a scholarship? Is there anybody that will take me? But guess what? That experience taught me that, again, the power of a good idea. A good idea, no matter the location, geographical location, it will penetrate the four walls. And so when I was in the University of Benin, I was so blessed to start an organization called Church on the Street. And that organization would become a launch pad for everything that I'm currently doing in my life today. Church on the Street served as a vehicle to just help people who are suffering. And we would start local fundraisers, help people to pay their tuition, medical bills. And then it spiraled into a development organization where we began to design real systemic interventions for IDPs. We're raising millions of nairas, to help people. We had people supporting us, and that idea made me make up my mind that if there was anything I wanted to do with my life, is I wanted to go into the field of international development. I wanted to be a bridge that could broker solution, policy advisory, and consultations between the global north and the global south. And today, if you go on my LinkedIn, many of the things I talk about is really how do the next generation of young Africans position themselves to be assets? How do we leverage the opportunities? How do we change the conversations of how, Africa has been perceived, especially as young people? Now, back into the story. So, I had a 2-2 degree, but my life changed forever. I got a full scholarship to go to England. I started this organization that, was changing, doing some incredible work, got a few awards, and now working with a very internationally reputable nonprofit. Now, how did all of this happen? From Benin City to getting a children's scholarship to working with an international organization. Oh, by the way, I started a consulting company called ID Consulting by the side. How did that happen? Now, I want to break the myth of what you call going global. Let's debunk the myth going global. What does it mean? You're a young girl, you're listening to me right now, and you've heard this concept, global, going global. What does it really mean? Come closer. When we talk about going global, we are saying that the ideas you have should be viable and good enough to penetrate spaces that your physical body has not gone. We are saying that you need to begin to carry yourself as a solution bearer. We are saying that you need to remove old mental models that says that you are dependent on somebody to come and save you from outside. We are saying change that mindset, start to see yourself as a solution. And when you walk into a room, even if the people are more powerful than you are, ask yourself, what solution can I bring in? That's how a global mindset thinks. Take, for instance, in Singapore today, the government are investing so much in their technology, especially in the area of education for technology. And a lot of the young people who are being churned out from Singapore are creating amazing softwares and building incredible technologies. Young people your age. Question: you're stuck in a country or in a continent that doesn't have that provision. Does it mean that you are a total failure? No. What that means is that you need to begin to ask yourself, what are the people who are my global peers? What are they doing right now? And begin to up your game. See, internet has broken all the barriers and all the borders. Nobody is erecting new borders and saying, oh my gosh, you're Nigerian, you can't come here. You're American, you can't come here. With YouTube alone, you can learn so much. I learned communication from YouTube. There's certain things I learned from YouTube without having to go. In fact, just yesterday, Massachusetts Institute of Technology has an open courseware, and I was taking a course on communication in MIT. I'm a Nigerian. I don't have an admission to MIT, but I was taking a course on YouTube with free course. Now, what am I saying? You need to ask yourself, where do I want to be? Okay, I want to be a doctor. What does a global doctor look like? Oh, I want to be a development consultant. What does a global development consultant look like? The goal is to ask yourself, this thing that I want to become, what's the highest version of it? And then you begin to take concrete actions and critical steps towards it. Now, having established what going global is, how do you begin to take steps and take actions? The first thing is you need to give language. Give language to the things you want to achieve. I remember that the first time I ever sat on an airplane that took me out of the continent of Africa was in 2022. It was only 3 years ago that I ever traveled out of the continent of Africa was in 2022. And so what that means is that for 20 something years of my life, I had not built something viable enough to take me out of the continent. And there are many people today, they are 67 years old. They are not bothered that, look, there's more to my life. Why should I be stuck in this continent? Now, mind you, I've never used the word Japan in the course of this conversation. Everything that I've said is about global mobility, building and developing ideas, becoming such a reputable asset that nobody can do without you. That's all I've said in the course of this conversation. And so you need to begin to ask yourself, give language to that thing that you want to do. Oh, I want to become a musician. Okay, I want to be a songwriter. What does a global version of this stuff looks like? Who is the best person that has done it? And then you begin to go on YouTube and listen to their talks, understand their mindset, understand how they map their words, understand how they even show up. And there's a beautiful thing I've discovered. When you listen to a great person long enough, you begin to see patterns in their life. Take, for instance, John Maxwell, an incredible leadership expert and leadership coach who has consulted for governments, countries, Fortune 500 CEOs. When you listen to John Maxwell's story, he will tell you that at some point in his life, he decided to commit 1 hour every day to learning only about leadership. And he did that consistently for a decade. And over time, he became an expert. And that's when he came up with the thesis that if you commit 1 hour of your life every day for 3 years, you will become an expert in that thing and people will know you. By just listening consistently to John Maxwell, I know that if I continue to read books about global development, if I continue to read books about Africa history, if I continue to read books about economic development, a time will come when I may just be sitting at the World Economic Forum panel and I would contribute something that will make everybody want to ask, who is this gentleman and who is this guy? That's how you begin to think global. Now, back to my story. The first time I traveled out of the continent of Africa was in 2022. I remember that I couldn't sleep the night before because here I am going to a country in Europe that, oh my gosh. And it finally dawned on me that there are decades when nothing happens. And there is a day when a whole decade collapses for your sake because you have been consistent. You see, God has a justice system that if you are wasting your life on TikTok, wasting your life on Instagram, and you think you're just going to emerge as this amazing figure, you are joking. You can't tell me that there is a girl right now who, while you're spending time to build yourself, there's a girl right now who's reading articles on Harvard Business Review on finance, Harvard Business Review on policy development, and you are just wasting on TikTok. And both of you will go on your knees and pray and say, God, make us globally relevant, give us opportunities at global spaces. And you think that girl's prayer will not be answered. God's justice system will make sure her prayer is answered. Why? She's ready. And so this whole myth about going global, we've debunked it. What do you need to start doing? Give language to where you're trying to go to. For me, I told myself I wanted to become a globally renowned international development expert. Who is somebody that has done it? There's Dambisa Moyo, there's Jeffrey Sachs. When you read their papers and I read their articles, universities are using them as case studies of their argument for foreign aid. I want to be able, even though I'm not an academia and I don't want to really delve into academia, but I want to be able to have such a thorough thought process that when I tell people that, look, in the next decade, this ABC would happen for Africa. This is what has happened in the past 50 years. By following that model, if we transition and impute this little policy recommendation, something will change. People will they will invite you to the White House and say, look, we're trying to build an African relation. We've seen the things you're doing. Come on board and sit on this committee. It's possible. So because I gave language to that thing, I know what I invest my time on. So question, give language to where you're trying to go to. Second point that you need to establish is you need to ask yourself, what do I need to start doing that would reflect where I'm going to? Quick story. The last time I was on a bus from Benin, Abuja to Benin, we had, if you travel frequently, if you're a road traveler and you travel frequently by road, when you travel from Abuja, usually you stop at a place called Lokoja and just to take a break, buy lunch and stuff. And I remember that when the bus stopped and everybody alighted from the bus to get food and get everything, probably there were 20 something people in that bus. I was the only person that came back with a book. There was a bookshop at that park where, the bus would park and people can get food. I saw a book, The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie. The book was 600 naira. I bought it. And the rationale behind buying, not because I had the money, the rationale behind buying that book was, if I get invited to a school word forum in Oxford, for instance, how am I going to articulate and enunciate my thoughts and process my word in a way that these people will say, this guy is worth investing in? And that was the rationale behind buying that book. Now, you would ask me, but why were you traveling by road? I could not afford to fly. I was a student. I couldn't afford to fly. And so even in that state, there was a mindset I was wielding. There was an attitudinal disposition I was building. I knew buying books that connected to my future were important, and that would get me global. And then the final point I would recommend is looking for mentors. Who is somebody right now that looks like where you're going to? How much do you watch them? How much do you listen to them? How much do you listen to their thought process? Those things, as mundane as they sound, they are very important. For me, in the early years of my journey, Fela Duroche was an inspiring man and still continues to remain an inspiring man. I loved how he was able to weave words and build a beautiful tapestry from when he communicated. I love how he was able to elicit emotions when he spoke to people. And so I always thought I would become a public speaker. And so he still remains a mentor of mine. And I would listen to him. And then I graduated from then on and I went on to John Maxwell. John Maxwell, I love his art, his ability to be able to build an emotional bridge and bring you from where you are to where you want to be, to where he wants you to be, with just his beautiful stories. And then I went on, I started listening to Eric Thomas. I love the energy, the zest he used to bring in his communication. Now, if you notice a pattern of the people I've called mentors, they were communicators. But my goal was international development. Now, I knew that I wanted to mix international development and communication. And so many of the people that I've often find to be mentors are people who speak very well, who enunciate very well, who have the ability to crystallize their thoughts. These were individuals that I often gravitated towards. All right. Now, moving on from there, it's also important that you understand that being global is about a mindset. We've debunked the myth. I've showed you the strategies, and now I'm telling you that it's about a mindset. It's a mindset you would hold. And I'll tell you guys this story. There was a day I had attended a workshop, and it was a workshop on the neuroscience of performance. And they talked about how your inner environment controls your outer environment. And the speaker had explained that carry your physical body to places that look like where you want to go. Now, imagine waking up every day and all you hear is cock crowing. In Nigeria, there's what you call Okada. Okada, those are like bikes, motorbikes, roaming around, muddy soil everywhere, brown roof everywhere. That's all you see. Guess what? Unconsciously, your internal environment will create that reality for you. And so the speaker said, carry your physical body to a place that looks like your future. And I said, wow. Mind you, I've never told this story anywhere. And so I said, okay, guess what? I checked my bank account in Abuja. Maybe, I don't know about now, but back in 2020, 21, probably one of the most expensive hotels would be Transcorp Hilton. And I decided I was going to go to Transcorp Hilton Hotel. At Transcorp Hilton, I would buy myself a meal and I would sit down there, and because that's the kind of places I want to be going to. That's the kind of place I want to take my family, my wife, because these are where wealthy people go to. Now, what are we talking about? Being global is a mindset. Being global is a mindset. And so I took all the money in my account. Guess what? I'd asked somebody, how much do you think it costs to eat a meal in Transcorp? They say, a bottle of Coke there is 50,000 naira. And I believed it. It put fear in me. I was like, okay, that's fine. If a bottle of Coke is 50,000, and the guy even said, you won't see the bottle. I say, I said, okay, if it's 50K, no problem. I'm going to do it regardless. The goal is not even to eat. The goal is just to put myself in that environment and let something happen to my mind. And let something happen to my mind in a way where I can believe that this can become my reality. This can become my reality in a few years from now. And so that experience taught me a very powerful thing. Do you know, when I went to Transcorp Hilton, I sat at the reception. I was at the reception. I wore a two-piece suit. I ironed it, dry cleaned it. I sat at the reception. When I sat down there, Something in me was telling me you don't belong here. And every time I saw a waiter coming towards my direction, something internally would tell me they are coming to drive you away. They are coming to drive you away. Where did that come from? That came from an experience of my internal environment not used to being in such excellence. And so, because I was not used to being in such excellence, everything feels wrong. And so, my physical metabolism was reacting against this excellence I was seeing. And I had the money in my account, but I was afraid that they will come and pursue me, that I didn't belong here. Because I was used to seeing Okada, brown roof, dirty environment. That's all I was used to seeing. That was my normal. But guess what? I fought through that emotion and finally, went upstairs to where the buffet was being served. Guess how much a whole buffet meal? I don't know how much it is right now, but in 2021 when I went, or 22, a whole buffet was 12,500, and it came with a drink. That individual who told me a bottle of Coke will cost me 50,000 had never been to Transcorp Hilton. He heard it from somebody, and that same person heard it from somebody. As a result, that's what you call the crab mentality. He was already eliciting fear in me for an experience that he had never had. He had already built a mental barrier for an experience he had never had. And so he doesn't believe that, how can I go and pay 50,000 naira for Coke in Transcorp Hilton? Guess what? A whole buffet was 12.5. Be careful who you listen to. Be very careful the sort of environments you give your attention to, because you would eventually recreate the reality you expose yourself to. I had a great buffet experience. I took photos. I told myself, now you have conquered Transcorp Hilton. Let us go to the nations next. While you are praying and trusting God to be global, there are certain experiences and exercises you would have to do. All right. Now, because I broke that barrier, if I'm going to Transcorp Hilton tomorrow, I'm going to wear a t-shirt and shorts. I don't need to iron my suit. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys. Do you know, on that same day that I went for a buffet experience, that same day, literally when I was walking in, the governor of Lagos State, Governor Sanwo-Olu, was also coming in. On that same day, the table I was sitting to have my meal, Kobams was sitting just adjacent of me. Kobams Asuko, the music artist, was sitting just adjacent of me. Exactly where I needed to be, because this is the kind of environment my future needs to experience. What I was doing was I was priming my internal environment to have that global mindset. And so it is critical and important that you understand that a lot of the work you need to do has to be internal before it becomes external. And when I altered that reality, you won't believe it became a lot more easier. There's so many experiences I'll tell you guys. I can't tell you guys, but there's a book I would recommend. It's called The Greatness Guide by Robin Sharma. I'll find the picture of the book. I'm trying to put it somewhere here. The Greatness Guide by Robin Sharma. It was in that book I learned that it is better to buy a wristwatch of 50,000 naira, one wristwatch of 50,000 naira, than buying a wristwatch of 2.5, because that 50,000 naira wristwatch would last you more. It is quality, and when you walk into a room, people know you are wearing something, and they'll, like it or not, people respond to excellence. And before, I'll be like, how can I take 50k to buy a wristwatch? But guess what? That place you are going to, you need to look like it. Now, this is not fake it till you make it. This is preparing yourself for where you're going to. All right. Now, as I begin to wrap up this conversation, we've established debunking the myth of global mindset. Exactly what is global mindset? And I've showed you an example of how to begin to prime your environment. Now, here's my story. When I finished my master's, when I finished my undergraduate in Benin City, a 2-2 degree, a bachelor's in education, but I wanted to become a global development expert. My parents did not have the money to send me to go abroad. I had friends who were traveling. I didn't have it. But I had one thing. I had a sense of agency that I can't control the financial part, but I can control how I prepare for that experience. And so what did I do? I began to write on LinkedIn. I began to share my thought process, my ideas on LinkedIn, on the things I believed could make Africa better and Africa great. Now, LinkedIn didn't get me the scholarship. I had to put in the effort of applying. But before applying, I began to read a lot. I was reading Harvard Business Review. I was reading the Stanford Social Innovation Review. I was exposing my mind to environments that look like my future. Because getting global is not just talk. It is work you have to put in. And when it was time for me to apply for the scholarship, I had church on the street that could serve as proof and evidence that truly I am worth investing for the area of international development. I have a repository of works that I have done, evidence on YouTube. There were stats, there were data to show the work that we've done. And because I've been reading, it was easy for me to convince the panel that, look, if you invest in me, I will change the continent. I will contribute to the continent. How do you go to a room and tell them that in 2000XX, only 4.4% of Nigerians' GDP was invested in education? As a result, Nigerians' next set of leaders or next set of generation cannot grow. You can't just put 1.5 trillion naira and expect that will be the next workforce or the next people who will be leaders of the country are going to be viable candidates. Education has to be an important asset. If the government isn't helping, I'm already doing my little token in my environment through the Rural Leadership Bootcamp, the Readers Accelerator Program. We've raised $20,000 for that project. These are the stories of real people. If you invest in me, I promise you, you will not regret it. And I got into that room, came out of that room as a Chiefling scholar. Over £100,000 was invested in my education. I got a master's degree from the University of Bradford. I'm going to leave a picture with my professor, Professor Anand, a great man who inspired me during the course of my one-year program in England. And today, I have the incredible opportunity of working with a global team with my international development master's degree. Everything I've said is to show you that, like me, you can go from Benin to entering the hallways of the White House, entering the hallways of the presidency, entering the hallways of nations. You can go from having nothing right now, not even having an international passport right now, to going from being such a valuable asset to the country because you chose to work on yourself. Now, if this video has meant something to you, please leave a comment below, subscribe, and like. Guys, like it and drop a comment of one of the most inspiring things. And if there are things you want me to talk about, leave them in the comment section. Thank you very much.